Welcome to 10th or Tuesday, episode number 17. Today is day 110 that the GOP has failed to repeal Obamacare. But I'm here with my partner. My name is Michael Boldin. I'm here with Mike Maharrey in Lexington, Kentucky. Hello, right?
Hello.
I know a lot of people believe that the House and Congress passed a bill to repeal Obamacare, and I'm sorry. All I can do is chuckle at it. We'll leave it at that.
Right.
They passed something, but it was not a repeal.
No.
But there's been actually a lot of really good things happening on the state level since our last episode, Mike. And I think one of the most important bills is dealing with the monetary crisis that this country has been facing for a long time. 2 years ago, Mike, a signature bill passed in Texas to facilitate or to actually establish a bullion depository in Texas where people would be able to conduct transactions, store gold, silver, other metals, and then actually it would hopefully be used to do electronic transactions. And now it looks like Giovanni Capriglione, the representative who pushed to get that bill passed, has got a follow-up piece of legislation that just passed unanimously in the Texas House a few days ago. Tell us a little bit about what's going on there.
So basically what he's doing is he's creating the kind of the regulatory foundation to get the bullion depository up and running. So this bill that just passed unanimously has a whole range of provisions in it dealing with how it will be run, in board of directors, things like that. It also has a very important provision in it that would prohibit the state from charging any type of property taxes or technically ad valorem, I think is how you pronounce it,
right?
Taxes. So
ad valorem. Is it valorum or valorum? I don't know. Maybe someone will tell us.
I don't know. I'm from Kentucky. So
Comments, please.
It's
Comments, please.
valorum in Kentucky.
Perfect. I thought that was what I used to put on my Nike shoes.
So
Velcro.
Right.
Go on.
So anyway, that's it's a very important bill because it
Yes.
basically puts the foundation to get this thing up and running. And he's been working really hard ever since the initial bill establishing this bullion depository was passed to make sure that it actually comes into existence and does what it's supposed to do. And the property tax part of it is very important in terms of being able to use gold and silver that's stored in the depository in transactions. And that's one of the key pieces of this bill.
Without a tax penalty.
Exactly.
So like if you just stored it there, like your savings account, you want it to be gold and silver. Maybe every now and then you have your bullion depository credit card or debit card and you want to do a transaction. It's got a Visa logo on it. This is the vision for this. You don't want to have to be charged by the state taxes on owning that property. So that's a very important part. It's House Bill 3169. It passed 143-0. I'm actually very surprised. It tells me that people, after all the debate over 2 legislative sessions, maybe longer, so at least 4 years in Texas, people across the political spectrum have recognized the importance of saying, hey, we're going to do this. Now, Mike, maybe I didn't hear it from you. I'm not sure, but I thought that House Bill 3169 also included provisions to allow for branches, so almost like a Texas gold bank. Do you know anything about that? No? Yes?
No, I don't. It may well.
Okay, well,
the number of provisions that are in this bill, it's like, I don't know, it's a huge, long bill, and it's got all kinds of different provisions in it. So that actually sounds accurate to me, but I don't want to go on record.
We'll keep an eye out on that. Maybe if you next time you talk with the sponsor, see if you can get some info on that. That was my understanding on the legislation, and we'll see if we can look into that a little bit further for reports as it goes over to the Texas Senate. It's already in the Senate Finance Committee. If you're in Texas, call your state senator and ask for support of House Bill 3169. Another really interesting bill that I think we've talked about on a previous episode at an earlier stage is off to the governor in Tennessee. It's a bill to repeal the state-level prohibition. So it's legalizing or decriminalizing firearm, what they call silencers. And we got some feedback from someone on Facebook that actually appreciated the fact that we put the word silencer in quotes because, and I'm far from an expert on this, but learning that, look, this really isn't something that silences.
Right.
And I think that's what opposition to these so-called silencers, they use that because then they can say, well, if you're silencing the sound, then this is going to be used by people to murder people only. That's the only way it can be used. It's the Tennessee Hearing Protection Act. It passed both houses, and I think Governor Haslam is going to sign it. Is that right?
Yeah, I suspect that he will sign this bill, and yeah, it does. When you say silencer, it gives this impression that people are walking around, and all you get is a click, and that's not it at all. It's still pretty loud. If I was to fire a gun in my house with a silencer, I wouldn't be surprised if my next door neighbor could hear it because we're pretty close together. But it is a hearing protection thing, and a lot of people that utilize firearms on a regular basis like to use silencers, to protect their hearing, and that's really how the bill was framed, as a hearing protection bill. But I think the important aspect of it is that it will actually take away a layer of laws, as we like to say when we talk about marijuana and hemp, and just make it easier for people in Tennessee to get silencers and utilize them. And when it's easier to do something at the state level, it makes it much more difficult for the federal government to regulate and prohibit it. So,
well, two things. First, I'd love if someone could tell us what to call these things, because I'm going to keep calling it a silencer as well. And I know it should. Should we call it a muffler? I don't know. Maybe someone will give us a comment on that. But I'd love to know what it should be called, so in the future we can reference it properly without giving it the negative connotation that our opposition wants to.
Right.
And you're absolutely right. This is if you're removing the prohibition on a state level, it opens the door, or it makes it more difficult for the federal government to enforce their own prohibition. And my understanding is these items are prohibited under the 1934 National Firearms Act, unless you go through some process, which means they could make it more difficult or less difficult at some time. And we don't want the federal government to have that kind of control. Right. So decriminalizing on a state level is very good. And if maybe President Trump at some time, like President Obama at some point for a short amount of time, decides to deprioritize enforcement of a particular federal law, he could do that on the federal level, and then you've already got the state level out of the way, right. And that creates a great foundation. And then additionally, if a new president down the line wanted to get more aggressive on these items, if people are already buying and selling them, right, because the state isn't going to prosecute, it's going to be it's just very positive. It's a weird direction. It's not something that we necessarily approach in a lot of our work on this, but I think it's really exciting, and it's a blueprint for other things that are prohibited by Washington, D.C.
Yeah, absolutely. It's creating a market. It's expanding the market. And when you expand the market, expanding markets tend to keep expanding. It's almost like like the law of gravity. Once gravity takes a hold of something, it doesn't really let go. And once markets start to grow, then it's very difficult to put that back in the box.
It's certainly going to be up to the people of Tennessee to decide if they actually are going to just keep following Washington, D.C.'s orders on silencers, or if they're going to say, hey, now the state isn't going to do anything about it. It's going to be really tough for the feds. Will they start to overwhelm Washington, D.C.? I recommend approach number 2 because that's what the founders would have recommended. But we'll see how things go. We know that they're out of the way. This is an approach that has been taken on primarily marijuana and hemp in a number of states, and it's been very effective. When the state stands down, then people are like, you know what, I'll start growing some hemp in the backyard, and they keep expanding, and all of a sudden, like in Vermont, we see hundreds and hundreds of acres growing in defiance of federal prohibition. But speaking of hemp, our next bill in Washington State, House Bill 2064 from our friend Matt Shea, Representative Matt Shea in Washington State, just got signed into law to take hemp off the state-controlled substances list. So that's awesome because cannabis, marijuana, is legal there, but the state was still looking at hemp, which has almost no THC. You can't get high from it. This is an industrial product that people use. It's grown primarily in China and in Canada, and then it's imported here into the United States, where farmers are prevented from growing it. So if you want to stop the bad deals, President Trump with China, stop importing hemp and allow people to grow it here, but we don't count on that. So we like seeing states like Washington decriminalizing it. However, there's a huge roadblock in Washington, isn't there? Not just D.C.
Yeah, it's really one department, it seems like, of the state government, the Department of Agriculture, and they've got a hemp licensing program that is very federally compliant, and they're very proud of the fact that it's federally compliant, and they want it to be federally compliant for some dumb reason. And so they're pushing.
Yeah, you know why?
They're
so
pushing.
they can keep getting their stupid licenses.
Yeah,
out.
exactly.
The stupid fees on this stuff. It's terrible.
Yeah. And so they've actually pushed through a bill. So basically, the situation that we've got is that we've got two separate pieces of legislation which do the opposite things. We have the bill that was signed into law that completely removes hemp from the controlled substance list. And then we've got this other bill that is at the governor's desk that would impose penalties on growing hemp without a license, which would essentially put it back on a controlled substances list of sorts. So we're really hoping that the governor doesn't sign this into law because it's ridiculous. And what really blew my mind is that the Hemp Association there in Washington is pushing for the federally compliant licensing program, trying to sell this idea that it's going to make it much easier to build a hemp industry, and that just doesn't even it doesn't fit with the facts. We look at the states where we've really seen hemp industry start to develop, and they're Colorado, Oregon, Vermont, Maine, all states that have legalized hemp without regard to federal prohibition. So,
you know what's interesting? You shared with me this press release from the Washington State Hemp Industry Association that, and I saw some news reports about the other bill. It's Senate Bill 5131 that we want vetoed in Washington State because it would basically do the opposite of what was already signed into law. But who knows? The governor there is a moron, so maybe you should expect something idiotic.
Probably.
Obviously, the legislators there in general are pretty idiotic as well.
Right.
But one of the quotes I saw in a news report was, "I don't expect anyone really to grow hemp without a license." Well, it's pretty absurd to say that because some of the largest growers in Colorado, even though it's licensed there now, started their growing before they did any licensing.
Right.
And there's no licensing in states like Vermont, from my understanding, as well. And people are growing there. People were growing in Oregon before they had a regimented licensing program. People are willing to do this. It's just like, if you're always going to keep attacking their freedom, it's going to make it far more difficult. So we would like the Hemp Industry Association to get the hell out of the way.
Yeah.
And we'd like to see the Washington State Department of Agriculture shut down. Or, I don't know. They're awful.
Go
They're
away,
awful. They just,
right?
They love being in compliance with Washington, D.C. And, and you had a great, I had a great quote in there in your report on this. Basically, here's a liberal state. You'd think that they're part of the so-called resistance, but they should be ashamed of themselves that they're basically saying we're going to help Jeff Sessions enforce his war on cannabis, particularly on hemp. And that's a shameful position. You should not be doing that in any state, but even more so in Washington, especially now that they've already passed something into law.
Yeah, it really boggles my mind. I mean, what a weird double standard. We're going to take a stand and we're going to defy the feds on marijuana, but we're going to be right with the feds when it comes to hemp. What? I mean,
yeah, well, there's not a lot of competition of imported marijuana from China and Canada.
Well,
so
yeah,
maybe
there's that.
Maybe there's more lobbying going on to stop the hemp. I know we actually hear a lot of lobbying that happens behind the scenes to stop hemp legalization or decriminalization bills, because that interferes with a huge market, and it's keeping American farmers down by keeping this product illegal. It's very easy to grow, and it's absurd. It's really a shame that this country is doing this to people and states like Washington. But we'll keep an eye on it. Hopefully 5131 will get vetoed and some people will have the courage to start growing in Washington State. And kudos to Matt Shea. He's done many years of work to try to push this issue forward. Over in New Hampshire, a bill to allow a local opt-out on Common Core passed out of committee. It's already passed one chamber, I think the Senate, and now it's passed out of a committee in the House side. Is that right, Mike?
I think that's right. One way.
Okay,
it's either
let's
one way or
skip
the
that
other.
Okay, so I'm pretty certain it's Senate Bill 44. It's now in the House Education Committee that passed by a 16 to 2 vote.
It's pending in the House.
So what's going on that one is it's not ending Common Core in the state, but what it's doing is it's devolving the decision-making to the local jurisdiction. So this is a very interesting approach because there was opposition to ending Common Core in the state for some crazy reason. But at least you're allowing the people closer to home to make a decision, and maybe in the long run that's the better approach. You win through the war of ideas, through taking action and putting your ideas into practice. And we'll see what's going on with Senate Bill 44 in New Hampshire. You have any other thoughts on that one, Mike?
Yeah, there was an interesting amendment that was added in the House committee that kind of broadens the bill a little bit and would prohibit any new state academic standards from being implemented without going through a legislative committee process. It would put a little bit more of accountability on before the state or the State Department of Education unilaterally imposes any type of new standards. So it really seems like they're wanting to devolve education down to the most local, basic local level there. And I think that's the best way to do it, because every locality is different. You know, you've got different different demographics and different ways of doing things. And
you can also go to our friend Tom Woods' site, ronpaulhomeschool.com, if you're into that sort of thing. We've got about 1 minute to go here, Mike, maybe a little bit longer. I just wanted to briefly touch on this Colorado asset forfeiture bill. It's primarily addressing, as we've reported on previously, this federal asset forfeiture loophole, withdrawing from it, participation from it in most situations. It passed the House. First, it was introduced, killed in the Senate committee. When it reintroduced in the House, right? Where are we at now? It passed the House and...
It's passed the House, and it's passed 2 Senate committees now, I believe.
Already, in a matter of 4 or 5 days, it passed 2 Senate committees, so it's going to be going to the Senate floor soon. So if you're in Colorado, the bill is House Bill 1313. Call your state senator. Some people still call their representative or senator in Washington. Call your state senator.
Yes.
Ask for a yes vote on House Bill 1313. And that about wraps it up for this week. Mike, anything else that you wanted to mention?
One thing I thought was really cool, I did a report today that I'll be publishing on our blog here in the next day or so. A bill that's been introduced in Louisiana to expand their right to try, to address a very specific piece of technology that the federal government is denying to people that are suffering from ALS. It's a really cool computer program that allows them to guide wheelchairs just with their eyes. But it's still,
God, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's awesome. But it's still in the clinical trials, and there's a real high-profile former NFL football player in the state that has ALS, also known as Luke Garrix, and so he's kind of been a face and has pushed the issue forward. And so there's a bill that would allow at the state level people that have ALS to access technology, despite the fact that the feds won't let them. So I love that bill, and just another way that once something gets set, it tends to expand. You know, they passed right to try a couple of years ago, and now they're looking at expanding it into a new arena. So really excited.
So if you want to follow, we have a lot that we don't cover here that's posted on 10thamendmentcenter.com and our blog, blog.10thamendmentcenter.com. If you want to follow, we do an almost daily update by email or a weekly update. Go to 10thamendmentcenter.com/register to get our updates sent to you, and you can follow all kinds of good stuff going on. Sometimes bad. We're reporting on that stuff too, just so you know what's happening. And then, of course, if you really support our work, starting at $2 a month, you can become a monthly member at 10thamendmentcenter.com/support. That does more than you can imagine, even just a couple of dollars here and there. Of course, thank you for watching. We'll see you next time here at 10th or Tuesday. Have a great day.